So the 10-point EPA Cybersecurity Checklist is largely around, these are the key things that they've called up. The most important thing is to audit your IT systems and identify vulnerabilities. Like utilities, most OT and other OT networks, many folks don't know what connected infrastructure that they have that has been laid out in those networks, largely because they have been there for the last 15 to 20 years or maybe earlier, right? So knowing what is on that network, what those assets are, what vulnerabilities, what vulnerabilities exist on that on those assets, and how those vulnerabilities can be exploited is is the first step that the EPA prescribes. The second one is to make sure, this is an easier one, all IT systems that connect to that OT network have to be patched, have to have the latest antivirus and anti-malware updates, all right? Always make sure, or alerted if that is not the case, right? All patches installed on IT systems, but they don't specifically call out OT systems, but that is a fundamental reason why they don't do that is many a times patches are incompatible. So if you went to a higher patch, the process control systems that interact with that asset may not interact with them. So they have not specifically stated OT assets, but IT assets for sure they wanted to be patched. They have, this is a relatively new document, so they do identify that remote access, secure remote access is a critical need. So the ability for your technicians, your operators to connect into that OT facility or into that water plant facility and work or rectify issues as they see is critical. But when that connectivity is made, it should be as secure as possible, right? One of the key ways of doing that is segregating your control access and your other IT networks. So when we're talking control access is your OT network, making sure that there is no easy way of hopping from the IT world into the OT world. There has to be an identity and access management system or some kind of a gate that that is preventing anyone or anything from coming from the IT world into the OT world. Okay, constantly monitoring your network for suspicious activity, right? So this means looking at all the traffic that is typically many of the OT systems, you may not be able to actually get antivirus or an anti-malware solution on them, largely because they're sometimes very small, constraint being things like PLCs or controllers. They don't necessarily run an operating system that is conducive to running an antivirus or an anti-malware, right? So you may want to actually monitor these systems primarily on the network to see what is going in, what is going out, how are they behaving, what commands are they sending, baselining that behavior, and then looking for deviations against that behavior, right? To notice if there's some, especially to identify if there's some kind of attack or some kind of a malicious code being executed in that network. Application whitelisting. So this goes beyond segregation of networks. So today, while the EPA says you segregate the network so that you have specific VLANs, the VLANs themselves could have multiple systems that are all talking to each other. If any system is on a VLAN, today what we're seeing is a large number of them. They can basically communicate to each other on any service that exists. So application whitelisting goes to the degree of something like microsegmentation, where you are actually specifying that there is only certain applications that can communicate with different assets within the network, and going to that granularity and stating that these services at these times can only talk to these assets, right? Physical security of all your IT equipment and your OT equipment is a key consideration that they have put together, largely because if you, there's been numerous studies around throwing USB sticks on the ground. You throw 10 USB sticks, 6 of them find their way to a laptop, because the people who find it plug those USB sticks into the laptop to figure out what is in that stick. And when they do that, if there is a malicious piece of code, that code goes in. So not only having physical access, restriction of physical access of people, but also restricting physical access, especially on ports, on terminals, on laptops, that stop any of these type of any unknown IT equipment to be connected to that terminal that then infects the whole network. One of the key things that they say is segregating the business, enterprise, and process control systems, having a clear demarcation to the fact that even if you have an Active Directory, if you have common logins for different applications, they are not necessarily shared for the same individual between the enterprise network and the process control systems. This improves two things. One is there is a deliberate need, when there is a deliberate need to connect to a process control system, the person has to enter new credentials to get in. And the second thing is, obviously, it gives you the ability to audit and monitor anyone who's coming into the network and using specific privileges that they have. Mobile phones have become pervasive. Almost everyone has mobile. I mean, almost all networks are today seeing some connection of, either through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, the, mobile equipment. These mobile phones and mobile equipment should be segregated from a network perspective. They should have their own plane of action. So not necessarily intermingling with either the enterprise network or the process control systems. And they're very, very, they have their own conduit. And if there is a need for them to interact with any of those, especially the enterprise or the process control system, they come through a gated interface, right? Developing contingency and disaster recovery plans for critical IT systems. So identifying what are your crown jewels, which are the systems that we can't have down at any time, having contingency plans if they ever come down. This is obviously a reference. This is also a call out to what we in the cybersecurity world say, that it's not whether you'll get hacked, it's only when you will get hacked. And when you do get hacked, what is a disaster recovery plan? Having backups, especially in terms of a ransomware attack, the ability to to quickly revert to that backup and restore the systems is very important. Standard of operating, developing and exercising, periodically standard operating procedures for manual operations. Even if your DR doesn't work, your disaster recovery plan doesn't work, you have the ability to manually override and monitor and still have the utility running. They do recommend redundancies. Redundancies are easier said than done, largely because, especially in the process control system, they're very expensive. Many folks don't even know what's running on them because they've been there for so long. Creating another redundant network is not necessarily the most feasible thing, but it's one of the recommendations that they have out there. And constant cybersecurity training for utility staff and contractors. So this is something that you can even get funding for. So if you want to have training periodically arranged, and they do recommend training periodically arranged, and there are a large number of cybersecurity companies that do provide specific training around IT security, but OT security is a relatively new field, and not many people know that. So there has to be specific training around OT and the type of attacks around